Life in the Leadership Lane. I'm your host, Bruce Waller, where I'm getting to talk to leaders that are making a difference in the workplace and in our community. What did they do to get started, and what are they doing to accelerate? And today, I have another special guest. Today, I'm talking to Janet Hanofee. Janet is the Chief Human Resource Officer at SOS International. She is certified with an SPHR. And oh my gosh, so many awards. I'm just going to share just a couple here. One of the top 10 rising HR leaders in the greater Washington, D.C. area, a Pinnacle winner, a 40 under 40. But here was the one that really impressed me. The Alaska Safari Club Wildlife Artist of the Year in 2016. Welcome to the show, Janet.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Oh my gosh. Well, listen. We actually connected recently on LinkedIn, and one of the reasons why I wanted to get you on the show today was because you had actually posted a picture, and I thought, you know what, there's a lot of good happening in this world. You had your PPE protection on, and you were talking about just something, an event that was going on, and I just thought, you know what, I want to get her on the show. I want to pull some of that good out for some of our listeners and viewers. And so I appreciate you being on today.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely a challenge during COVID to keep spirits up and still stay connected with employee engagement activities. So we try.
Yeah, for sure. I actually got to do some research getting ready for this show, and man, so impressive. I want to start though, if you could just share a little bit about SOS International and how you serve your customers for our listeners and viewers.
Sure. So SOS International is a defense contractor or government contractor, the largest family-owned defense contractor, which is it's unusual. You don't usually see a family-owned company in this kind of size and space in the industry. So they started out as originally it's owned by Sosi is actually the name of our founder, and she founded the company in the early 80s. It was a translator business, so they did a lot of language interpretation and had contracts like with the FBI and DEA agents, et cetera. So depending on, whatever work they needed, whether it's wiretapping or courts or whatever kind of interpretation that those different government agencies needed, they did. And then it's expanded. So when I joined them about 3 years ago, we only had about maybe 500 domestic US employees. Now, 3 acquisitions later, actually four acquisitions later in 3 years, much larger, more like a, close to $500 million company with global footprint in over 30 different countries and quite expansive work in IT, artificial intelligence, and a much more diversified portfolio than when I first started. So it's been a lot of fun. I think one of the acquisitions was twice as big in the U.S. than our current employees. So that's not a typical acquisition to buy one that's much larger than yourself. So.
Oh wow! Oh, that's
been a
fantastic.
Lot of fun.
Oh wow, that's fantastic. Man, I want to get into a little bit about that when we talk about leadership. Whenever it comes to these acquisitions and trying to just really like pull that culture together. But first, before we get into that, I want to just learn a little bit more about you, and I would love for you to share the Janet Hanofee story. Like, where did you grow up, and how did you get into HR?
I always love hearing how HR folks got into the profession, because very often it's not the typical way, right? We kind of fall into it from a different venue. But I actually grew up in Oregon and on the West Coast, and then ended up, I went to Alaska for college. So I went up on it's a different story. I went up on an athletic scholarship, but I ended up in University of Alaska Fairbanks, and I was studying journalism, and I got all the way to about my senior year in about junior, I guess, and you do that practicum, that kind of capstone project. And I went to a newspaper and realized I didn't like it. So I just done all this college, and now I'm ending up with a degree, and I don't think I want to work in the profession. So I decided that, I'd take a little time, try to figure out what I wanted to do. And I went into insurance. My mom owned a third-party administrator firm for employee benefits. And so I had literally grown up in the industry, and in high school I'd worked at her business. And so I'm sure I was one of my only classmates who knew what a cafeteria plan was and how. So I just went to the insurance industry, and I ended up going on the employee benefits side. And then I ended up in Valdez, Alaska, right in the pipeline there. And I was working just in administrative and insurance jobs, and a job came open for an HR manager, and it was on the pipeline. And I was reading it, and I was looking at all of the requirements for it, and I thought, I know I can do this job. I know I can do this job. I didn't have the exact experience. I had pretty close experience. So I sent a note to the CEO and just asked, told him why I thought I was a really good fit for the job. And he called me the next day and asked if I would fly to Anchorage for an interview. And I flew up there, and he asked me, I remember one of the questions in the interview he said was, have you ever fired anybody? And I was like, no, actually I have not. He said, well, what makes you think you could fire somebody, right? So I explained to him that, I had to tell a widow once that she had no life insurance coverage because her husband had committed suicide. Right? It was a very difficult conversation, and I had to lead with empathy, but also be clear and provide her the details so she could process the difficult news I was giving her. So I said, I've had to do that. I've had to tell somebody whose house burned down that they didn't have any coverage, and they had let their policy lapse. So I've had difficult conversations, and I know that, at times when there's that challenge with an emotion involved and trying to process information, it makes it critical as a communicator that you do it in a way that comes across, clear but compassionate. And he said, I think you could fire somebody. So he gave me a chance. I had a couple things missing on the resume, but I went to night school and got up to speed and ended up going back to college and got my degree. But he gave me that chance, and that's how I ended up in the profession.
Oh my gosh, there's so much there. So much there. First of all, that you having the courage, right, to send the note to the CEO. I mean, first of all, you had to take action there. But whenever he asked that question, being able to answer that, leading with empathy, I think we need more of that today. That is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, it was probably one of the best jobs I've ever had. I mean, I look back on it, I'm just so amazed that I did that. But I also, I'll talk with our veterans, and I volunteer with a community college to help out with their business students that went back to try to get a degree. That worked for me, and I'd like to get back to them. But I know a lot of our veterans that did the military career and then went, to private sector side, they have very transferable skills. They're just not always explained the same way. So I've done a lot of work with folks who are making that transition to say, just think of it a little differently. I mean, you can think about what the skill is that you need, the underlying skill. Maybe you don't have that exact experience, but you have something very comparable. And if you can show the employer that you have that ability, that's what they're looking for.
I love that. I love that. I love the coaching aspect of that. We actually partnered with a group with Dallas HR, Allies in Service, trying to help veterans really shape their resume because they have so much talent, but trying to help them communicate to back into the civilian workforce. So I got a couple things. Number one, first of all, Alaska. I have a bucket list of trying to get to all 50 states. Alaska is still on my list, so I can just imagine what. So when you were there, I mean, did you think? I mean, you were there for a long time. Did you think, hey, I'm going to
30 years
forever? Yeah. I mean,
no, it was. I think when I got there, I mean, honestly, I felt like I had landed on a different planet. It is so different, and it was so different from anything that I had ever known or been exposed to. So as a college kid, it was an adventure. And it was a beautiful state. I raised 2 boys there, and I was there 30 years. So I loved it. I absolutely loved it. But it's definitely not a place you want to grow old. And there's a lot of things you miss out on when you're there. So like, for example, there's no, no professional sports. Like, when I moved to Virginia 3 years ago, there's hockey games and baseball games and football. It's awesome. And I missed out on that a lot in Alaska. I only got to, go see those professional sports when I was on vacation. Same thing with live music. Getting the big groups to come up to Alaska is a little hard, just still don't have the population. So I'm enjoying and making up for lost time in Virginia and the DC area now.
Wow. I got to tell you though, there's a lot of cool things, the outdoor, we're going to get into some of the outdoors and some of the passions.
Amazing.
One of the things I always like to hear from leaders that are really making a difference. I'd love for you to share a little bit about, were there some mentors along the way that have helped you? And can you share a little bit about that? And then today, do you mentor anyone?
Yeah, so I did. I mean, that first job I took, working for that CEO turned out to be a fantastic mentor for me at a very pivotal time in my career. And he was great about teaching me the basic components of, managing a team. And it was I'd never supervised anyone before. So that was the bigger skill set that I needed to have, is, to try to learn how to be a manager. And I'm very grateful that he was so caring and compassionate and just wanted to see me succeed. So that's probably my most important mentor in my career. But as I've grown, no HR practitioner has all of it, right? I mean, there's so many different areas of HR that if you spent time in one area, there's other parts of the practice that you don't have any background in. And one of my early jobs, actually, it was a job right after that very first one. I was doing HR, I was managing HR for a fuel company that had operations in Canada. So now I have an international component, and I had a union, no union background. So I immediately went to the local HR chapter and found some colleagues that had union background, and just set up a schedule to try to get up to speed on, what do I need to know? What kind of rules do I need to be aware of? How can I get quick training on, some of these areas to beef up and make sure I'm ready, so that when that collective bargaining agreement comes up, I know what to expect for negotiations and how to move forward. So I found a girl that had that background and experience, and she was a wonderful source of information for me, and ended up being a great friend. And actually I got married last year, and she was one of my bridesmaids. So
oh, wow, that's fantastic.
And I kept for a really long time.
That's fantastic. Oh, I hear different leaders talk about mentors and sponsors and people that have helped them progress, right, in their career. But that's the first time I've heard someone talk really about the chapter. I mean, we talk a little bit about volunteer leadership. You are a former state council director for Alaska, as well as a former Anchorage SHRM chapter member. And the value of those resources available for you are incredible, aren't they?
Yeah, it was huge, and particularly international, because back then there was nobody local in my town that had an international background. So I was able to go to, at the time, I can't remember what SHRM called it, but it was some kind of like a thought leadership group of folks that had a lot of experience that were willing to give back. And I was able to go in there and find resources for Canada, and they helped me understand that, it's kind of opposite of the US, that the provinces have a lot more of the regulation than the federal government does. So you really have to know your exact province that you're operating in and how that works. And it's a little different than here, where we have the federals, most of the guidance, and then the states have nuances. So had I not had that mentorship, I'd have been paying an attorney, right? A lot. And I still had to pay an attorney. It definitely saved my corporation a lot of money by me networking and having those resources I could draw on.
Oh, that's fantastic. I always like to ask this question, especially to top level leaders. I wrote a book called Find Your Lane, and I always like to ask, was there a moment, like you landed that job with that CEO, and then you've progressed all these years. Was there a moment in your time where you found your purpose, you found your lane, your calling as an HR professional?
Yeah, that first job I had, It was, I describe it sometimes as kind of blood and guts HR. It was heavy employee relations, lots of relations. So I had, it was on the pipeline. I was managing a contract of about 100 workers that were blue collar and administrative professionals actually on the pipeline. So if you can imagine the conflicts and the issues that come up when you're in a remote area like Valdez, Alaska, which Valdez is about a 4-hour drive from the nearest McDonald's, just to give you an idea of how far it is. It's literally like, it's the last spot before the tankers grab the oil and then take it away, right? So it's a big port. The gas pipeline or the oil pipeline ends right there in Valdez, and then they're loaded onto the tankers. So a very industrial site, a lot of different rules, pipeline regulation rules, all kinds of stuff there. But when I remember after I had been in the job for about 6 months, I realized how excited I was every morning to go to work, and how happy I was, how quick the days went by, how varied the day was. You just never knew what was going to come up. And I'm a very creative person. That's what drove me to journalism, and so I'm an artist as well. And having that diversity in my day of everything's different. I never thought I'd find a job that actually that gave me that as well, right? Besides art, right? Art was, it's gonna be different every day, but this is the first real job I could make money at, good money at, that offered that. And I was just very grateful, and realizing that, wow, I'm so grateful for this profession. It is such a good match for me, and I absolutely love it.
Oh, that's fantastic. I think that's what we're all going for, right? In life, is to find that job that that you get excited about getting up for. I've shared this with many people before. One of the first times when I realized it, I was helping a friend move his mom, help her relocate, and how stressed out he was. And it was a very small move. She needed to move like a few boxes and a bed and a dresser, right?
Yeah.
But it was so, like, for me, it was so exciting because I knew I was adding value here. I was helping him reduce stress. It was just so fulfilling. I didn't really hardly make any money off of it, but it wasn't about that. It was about helping someone with my skill set. And so that was so cool. I love that. Oh my gosh. So let's talk leadership. I want to talk a little bit about SOS, your leadership. And I was wondering, I saw you on LinkedIn with your mask on, and it was I'm just going to say a good feeling post. And I was just wondering, have you had to, during when COVID arrived, I guess, 7 months ago now, we're taping this in October. It's going to be played in November of 2020. Have you had to shift your leadership and the way you've approached how you lead in 2020?
Absolutely. I think every manager has. I mean, particularly if you're not a hands-on manager and now your staff is completely remote and they weren't before, it takes so much more forethought, and you can't just see somebody in the hallway and say, hey, how was your weekend? You have to make sure that you're staying visible, that you're keeping in touch, that you're still having those valuable conversations and meaningful ones, even though we're all tempted just to talk COVID, particularly in the beginning. That was really challenging. But I think for me, I know morale was really down from the virus and having to stay away from everybody and not having that interaction. For us, we saw a lot of morale issues and concerns. Some of our contracts got shut down, and so then people were worried about their coworkers and revenue and how's the company going to be. So just a lot of stressors that you normally don't have to deal with. And so we really made a pact with the on the HR team to look for ways to try to connect people and to make sure that we were a source of of answers, and then also that we were doing our best to try to keep morale up. So that was our focus, and it took the form of simple things like putting up a SharePoint site and getting information out very quickly. The first weekend that we sent home our workers, we had policies up by Monday. We had town hall starting every Friday with the CEO. We had virtual events planned. Everything from, I taught a drawing class on one. I mean, everybody was doing the happy hours in the beginning. But we looked for ways to, instead of doing a company picnic, we brought in a celebrity chef and did cooking classes for the company online. We all cooked barbecue together, right? So we looked for just creative ways to keep people connected and still keep our culture, kind of alive. Because I think what makes SOSI really unique is we do have a very fun culture, very social culture, and that to have that just overnight be gone and not have the ability, we had to kind of rethink that. How do we keep people connected and grateful for that culture at the same time, as with the pandemic going on. So we added a lot of fun things in to keep morale up, even for kids too. We did a couple puppet shows like during the day to give parents with kids at home a chance to kind of get away from a meeting, and the puppeteers, had their names and interacted with the kids. So just to kind of just give parents a break. We did lots of surveys with the employees asking, what do they need? How can we help? And then we really focused on their safety and answering their concerns. And I think that's probably the most positive feedback we got from the employees is how quick we came out with information. We hired a physician to advise us on COVID strategy and our response. We had procured, I think, 5,000 antibody tests by the end of March. And if you think back to March, it was so remarkable that we got that. I mean, none of my peers in other companies were even thinking about testing yet, or what's that going to look like? But we'd already gone out and found antibody tests, had them on hand, were able to get them in place, even though we didn't have any guidance yet from DOL. So we just really focused on putting the needs of the employees first and taking some chances. But that the regulations would follow and we'd be okay. we did tweak them a couple times, but I think our employees just appreciated that we were very forward leaning and very solutions oriented and very focused on making sure we just could get them whatever support we could.
I love that. John Maxwell says leaders stand up and stand out during a time of crisis or challenging times. And that's what it sounds like you were doing. You were standing up. Hey, it's here. We're going to take this head on. I love how you shared that. Our CEO of our company was putting out bi-weekly videos to the entire team of our, as well as our independent contractors, our drivers.
Yeah.
Letting them know that, hey, we're here with you. We're available. I just love that.
Yeah, I did too. I mean, it just gave me such a sense of pride, and the employees, you could see, were relieved to just have some answers, right? Just to have some help and some guidance. We had a large independent contractor employee group as well that really struggled because their contract had been shut down. So they needed revenue source. And even though the CARES Act put in the unemployment for them, the system's not set up to handle that. So our employees our workers, independent contractors, were going to their local state of DOL agencies and were not able to get funds because they didn't have the infrastructure under the Department of Labor to actually have questions that applied to contractors to give them the information they needed to get money. So we actually hired a law firm to do webinars and then meet one-on-one with those employees that were struggling and work with them to get their state agencies to help them get relief funds. So that's one of the things I think I was most proud of that we did, because that group was really frustrated and they didn't have any answers, and they were struggling.
Oh, wow. So now are your employees back to the office yet, or are they working remote, or what's that world look like right now?
So some of our workers were essential for the government and they've been working the entire time. So that was the main reason we had the antibody test, because we just wanted to give them a peace of mind that, even though it's not perfect, at least it's giving them something to at least measure, whether have they been exposed or not, do they, if they were asymptomatic. We have a group at corporate that is pretty much all remote. We have about 50 people that come into the office or so every day on average, but we have a workforce of, a few hundred. So those folks are, coming in to work on a project. They're working in offices that are quite a ways away from each other. So we do have some folks that are coming in, just to kind of keep collaboration going, particularly on our business development teams and some of those. But most of our workforce is still very, very much remote. And of course, anybody that has kids, especially here in Virginia, they're doing the homeschooling, video school, where we call it now. So they're, all those parents are sitting at home. And we've had to kind of adjust and I just came from a conference call with, somebody had a kid running through the back of in the background, and somebody else's dog went nuts, and the postman came. I mean, so we've become so much more tolerant of that, and in an odd way, it's connected us more. So it's been, there's some good things that have come out of it.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to ask you, some of the silver linings. What
Yeah.
what have you seen? Some of the silver linings that have come out of this. I mean, this has been a very challenging situation, but you've taken it head on. And again, like I said, when I saw the photo, I said, you know what? She is looking for the good, finding the good, and going to spread the good. So I would love you to share maybe just a few silver linings that you've kind of
Yeah,
come out of that.
I think the post you're talking about, I had, I started a mask collection of funny masks and fun ones, and I try to outdo myself each week with something more crazy and elaborate than the last one. And I always have a safe one on underneath, but I do some over the top ones. And
Hmm.
it's just nice to hear the employees laugh if I'm coming walking the halls. They never know what I'm going to be wearing, whether it's, sequins or flashing lights on my mask, or, funny cartoons or whatever. But it's just nice to hear people laugh again, because you can't always see smiles. But I think one of the things that I've appreciated is on these calls, you get to see a little more human touch with the employees, right? I mean, you can't help it when the 3-year-old runs through in the middle of the meeting, or the dogs go crazy. And in fact, even during this call, I went golfing on Saturday, and we found a kitten that was lost and abandoned. And so this kitten's been running around this whole thing. I keep hearing me out. But it's just it's very humanizing to see that we all have lives outside of the office. And even just seeing people's backgrounds, where they dial in from, and asking questions. And it's been fun. I know a lot more about my team than I did beforehand, that I didn't know.
Oh, that's fantastic. I will say that that's been for me too, the humanizing part of it, just coming into people's homes. I mean, who would have
Yeah.
ever thought that? And,
Yep.
and giving grace and being okay with it. Like,
Yeah.
hey, you know what? It's not perfect back here. And everybody's like, we're good with that.
Yeah,
We're good with
exactly.
that. Oh man, that's
Yeah.
fantastic. I do have one question I wanted to ask you as well, is that, during this time, so for me, I'm in a sales and marketing role, and immediately companies put the pause button when it came to relocating talent, right? And so I said to myself, okay, I need to like shift here, and I need to focus. And what am I going to focus on? And I said, I want to connect, I want to stay visible, and I want to stay educated. So educated is where I want to go here, because I think it's been a great opportunity to continue to work on your personal development, your own personal growth. And I was just curious, is there anything that you do in your organization, or that you encourage or you personally do to just keep skilling up to get better?
Yeah, I guess I have a couple things to that I do. The first one is I volunteer for the Human Resources Certification Institute.
Hmm.
They're the ones that do the SPHR and the PHR and the GPHR ratings. And I've written questions for them for over 10 years now. But by being an item writer and writing questions for the exam, there's a very big process that goes into every single question. And you have to have the research, and you have to have backed up answers so you can prove that you have the right answer. And particularly when you're writing for senior professionals, which is kind of where I had my niche for writing. So I would do scenario-based questions, but it kept me sharp. And very often what I would do is, I still do now, I'm an editor for them, but when I was researching a question, I would think about a challenge I had at work, and then figure out, the best ways to resolve it, and come up with a story that goes with it, so that the test taker you can really measure the competency of understanding the different avenues they need to take with HR. So for me, that was a way that it forced me to research and to stay sharp on all the laws and all the rules, with such a moving, fast target in HR, to keep on top of all that employment law stuff. So that's what I did personally, just to make sure that I was always staying current. And then the other side of it is I volunteer at a community college. And as I said earlier, I meet with their there's students who are changing careers or are going back to school to try something different, since that was such a critical thing for me in my career. I really enjoyed. So I work with one of the local professors, and I talk to his graduating business class every year, or each semester, I guess. And I just get a lot of joy out of that one. But I feel like it's helpful, if nothing else, we really talk a lot about interviewing and resumes and how to make that first job, how to get out there and be brave and try to get that next step in your career.
I love the message because basically I have several people that will ask me about taking the HR certification, whether it's HRCI, SHRM, and they'll ask me about it. And I tell them that it's not about having the credentials, although when you once you complete the exam, you're going to be so like, oh, I'm so glad that's over. However, it's about the process and going through that journey. And you're talking about that too. You're thinking, well, you're sitting here thinking about these scenarios and going through the process, and that's the growth, right? That's the growth. And I tell people all the time, it's about getting in the arena and going through that, right?
Yep.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love that. So I would love to, I want to shift just a little bit. You've led a team, continue to lead a team. I would love to talk just about your personal everyday leadership. And I always like to just kind of see if I can pull out a discipline or a practice that you have every day that helps keep you on track in your leadership. Is there anything? What's life like for Janet getting up until she goes to bed?
So, I have the one thing I really try to do, and it never was worked before, but it seems like during COVID it is a little more thoughtful now. But I really try to have a good, meaningful conversation with one of my staff members every week. So whether that's, hey, how are you feeling about your goals? How are we working on projects? How's your work-life balance going? Whatever it is that we're talking about, is just to start the conversation and make sure that I'm giving them what they need. I have a fairly large team now, and with COVID, I have a very dynamic team and a lot of high performers on it, but high performers also sometimes need a lot of feedback, right? So making sure that I'm there and getting that time with them, and it's taken more time out of my schedule because I have to be thoughtful about it and plan it. Whereas before I could just go in and say, hey, we have a half hour, let's go grab a lunch, or I don't have that anymore. So I can't use that convenience. I have to actually make a point to do it. And I'm so fluid in my styles. It's hard for me to plan like that. So I've had to be very thoughtful about that during COVID. So that's my latest one that I always try to do. I think pre-COVID, I tried to just make sure that I was giving them support in all of the different dynamics that they were working on. So if they're going into a tough meeting and they need me to just jump in and give that support, or something's not going well, if somebody texts me, I tell my team, if you need me immediately, always text, right? Because I will, if you're taking the time to text me right away, I will immediately drop what I'm doing and come help you. If you email it to me, it could be an hour, it could be 2 hours. But if you text me, I'm going to drop what I'm doing and come help you. So they've learned that very quickly with me. So I always make sure I have my phone next to me in case someone's got something that they need immediate help with. We had an unfortunate thing happen this week where we had an employee who passed away, and I saw that text go off immediately with the note, please call. And I just know we have that trust built up with the team that I need to excuse myself and I'll be right back. And I left. I was in a board meeting actually, and I stepped out of it and just made my Zoom thing go blank and went and talked with them, got everything taken care of, and then zoomed back in. So making sure you're available, I guess, is the other piece of it. But for me, those meaningful conversations, that's been important for our relationships during this COVID, to make sure that I'm still staying connected to them and that that I'm helping where I need to.
I love that. I've heard that. I referenced John Maxwell earlier, and just now I thought about when he talked about the importance of walking slowly through the crowd.
Yep.
And just being there, being present for your team members. What a great practice. That's fantastic. I love that. I love that. I would love to ask And you've given some incredible advice already. I would love to ask if you have ever, if you've been given some advice that you share on a regular basis that might help someone that's listening or watching this podcast, that might help them in some way in their career. Any advice you've been given that you like to continue to pass on?
I think for me, it's be brave. Try to reach for that brass ring, and even if it's a little bit out of reach, keep trying. That job when I sent that CEO the note, if I wouldn't have done that, I would have found this career, right? So, and actually, the job I'm in right now, when I decided that I wanted to leave Alaska and that it was time, I was ready for new adventure and try something different. I applied for this job in Virginia as the first job I applied for. And my CEO loves to tell the story because I'm the first person that he ever hired that remotely. I mean, I applied from Anchorage, Alaska, and I applied, right? But I did my homework, right? I got an address first. I had a local address on there, so I made it through the interview screening. I got into it and I got the job. Being brave like that and just giving it a chance. You've got nothing to lose. And I've always learned something every time. Even if it didn't work out, I still learned something from it. So this job that I have now, this could be the job that I end my career on. It's that good of a fit for me. I absolutely love it. Great employer. I grow and learn new things all the time. And cold applied. Didn't know a single person here and just tried. So.
I love your message. I love your energy. I love your positivity. This is fantastic. Oh man, I've got so much more, but we need to, just because of time, we need to shift to what I call this time to accelerate. And I'm going to pivot a little bit because I have a few questions that I'll typically ask, but doing some research, you have an incredible and inspirational story. And so I have a few other, first of all, I would like to ask, do you read books or do you listen to podcasts? Is there one you prefer over the other?
I listen to, do you know what Blinks is? Blinks with a Z?
Blinks?
Yeah, it's a series of podcasts that you can go, they're usually sometimes they're 7 minutes, 15 minutes, half hours, and there's inspirational ones, there's leadership ones, there's management ones, and I built a profile on it, and it gives me one every day. So I can go on and get more of them, but if I'm doing my exercise or taking my walk like I'm supposed to during COVID, I'll throw that on and just listen to it. And it's been a wonderful source of inspiration for me.
I will put that in the show notes because I want to check that out as well. Oh man,
it's
when
awesome.
You said inspire, I get chills here. I love that. Okay, so you had mentioned earlier you went to school was it Anchorage?
Fairbanks, Alaska.
All right. So did you compete in any sports?
I did. Yeah. So I went up there on a full athletic scholarship for rifle shooting. I was NCAA Division I.
What?
For those 4 years. It was so much fun. So much fun.
That is fantastic. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was a big part of my life for a long time. I shot 22 in air rifle, Junior Olympics, and then I went to the U.S. International Shooting Championships, and yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Okay, so nobody would ever know that by just
looking
on LinkedIn. That is fantastic. Oh man, okay. So what about a favorite hobby? I heard you earlier mentioning a little bit about artistry.
Yes, I am a professional wildlife artist. I get to travel all over the world, photographing and sketching animals, and then I paint. And I have a gallery that represents me in Anchorage, Alaska. They primarily will sell my my large, grizzly bear paintings and moose and the animals that are in Alaska. And then I also paint Africa. So I have galleries down here I'm working with to now in this area, hopefully, to represent my African work as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. So I actually went to your website at janethanofee.com. And I'll put that in the links. I saw some of your paintings and I saw a buffalo and I thought, man, that is fantastic. So I'm curious, do you, so you still, I'm not sure during COVID, but you get to travel in your company?
Yeah, You know, I haven't, well, during COVID, I've been driving everywhere. But my husband photographs as well. And so he helps me get reference photos. But I also go to like large animal sanctuaries as well. And like there's one in Montana that I go to that has a large grizzly bear and a pack of wolves and tiger. And so I get to spend a lot of time, quality time with the animals and really draw them. So if I'm working on something where I need a lot of reference material, I'll go to one of the sanctuaries and really get some studies. I'm also in DC though, so I have the National History Museum. So all of the skeletons, like the whole bottom floor is just all animal skeletons, from everything from rhinoceroses to crocodiles. So I can go there as well to get, that's kind of like the best reference because you can actually see the bones and the structure, and it's a lot easier to get the animal right. So.
Oh, that's fantastic. You know, I was so excited because I was supposed to be speaking at a conference in Montana in September, and they canceled. And so they moved me to 2021. So I'm still good. I'm so.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. So I'm super excited to go up there. Oh man. So, okay. We talked about your first job there. I would love to hear your most unusual job.
Oh, I have a couple of them, and probably the one that was the most interesting when I first moved to Virginia is I owned a gold mine in Alaska, and I would travel on the weekends after work. So Fridays I would either jump in a little plane and go to the mine, or I would drive about 2 hours out of Anchorage, jump on a four-wheeler, and then it was about 4 hours in by four-wheeler. It was about 40 miles off-road across a mountain range and across 2 rivers. So I could go through there with my four-wheeler, or I had an off-road Jeep, but either one, get back to the gold mine and then mine all weekend, and then head back on Sunday and start my work again Monday through Friday. So that was it was
okay. Just to make sure everybody heard that, that's a gold mine, right? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was above the tree lines. It's in the Talkeetna Range, and tons of caribou that would migrate through there. So you could come up over the hill on a four-wheeler and you could be surrounded by thousands of caribou. It was, it's just a beautiful place. And like my family still operates it and has fun doing that on occasion. But yeah, I don't do that anymore. I'm in Virginia now.
What was okay, so you said you had 2. So what could be more unusual than that gold mine?
The second one, I was a crocodile hunter. So I got contacted by, it was in one of my art conferences I went to, and it was a safari club event, I think, of one kind. And one of the guides there came to talk to me about a problem crocodile that was in this little village north of Kwekwe, Zimbabwe. And there was a crocodile that was taking cattle from the local village, and they were very concerned that it was going to become, well, obviously was already a concern for the property and for the cattle, but potentially for human conflict as well. And they couldn't catch him. They tried trapping him and they couldn't get him. They couldn't get, they're very difficult to shoot. And that was what they needed help with, is that they knew he was too smart. They couldn't bait him. So they had to find somebody that could actually shoot him. And so with my shooting background, they asked me if I would, kind of barter and come help them out. So I got to go to Zimbabwe and take care of a crocodile. And he was a very large crocodile, and they're very cagey, very smart. So it took us a few days to find him, but we did find him, and I was able to help them out with taking care of the crocodile.
Wow, so, how cool is that? I don't know if I would have ever thought about coming across someone that worked in a gold mine, but a crocodile hunter. I mean, come on. That's pretty fascinating. That's pretty fascinating.
Yeah,
I can't even imagine coming across an animal the size of that.
He was so big, and they can run about 30 miles an hour. And he's a huge male, just a really big head on him, big male, and kind of arrogant. Like I said, he was taking the cattle, and the villagers were very scared of him. So it was a good thing. There was quite the celebration when he was gone, and they they knew the livestock was safe again. So.
Wow, that is so cool. Thanks for sharing that. Oh man, that is fantastic. So, you top level leader, you make a lot of decisions. What's one of the best decisions you've ever made?
Oh, hands down. I came to Virginia 3 years ago, and on a chance, I kind of followed a guy. And we got married in October this year. So,
Oh, wow. That's
hands
fantastic.
down, best decision I ever made.
Oh, wow. That is so fantastic. I met a guy. What was that? I'm just curious. I mean, me being in relocation, I mean, that's a long ways, right? You're relocating a long ways. There's a lot of change going on. What was all that like for you?
We talk about change management at work all the time, and that, but hands down, was the biggest change I had made in my life. Was 30 years in Alaska in remote areas and wildlife and outdoors to DC. I moved to King Street, right, in old Alexandria, and a tiny little carriage house. And I had this giant van, I don't know how big it was, giant moving company that I hired to move all my stuff down into this giant 30-foot storage locker until I could figure out what I was going to do. Because I had a huge house in Alaska, and I'm renting this tiny little place in Northern Virginia, and my life literally just changed completely upside down. And it was another adventure, and so fun. It's so different. And after I'd been here for about 7 months or so, then I knew I wanted to live in a slightly different area with not as long of a commute. And that whole storage locker, I think I only retained maybe 10% of it, and I gave everything else away, just because I guess there's that nostalgic history that you're keeping on to. And it took me a while to kind of realize, I haven't touched anything in that locker for a year. How much do I really need of this stuff? Mm-hmm. So I lessened my footprint and just started a new chapter.
Yeah, I talk about that a lot when families are relocating, how purging is like one of the best parts about the move.
It really was. And I would not have thought that. I mean, I think there's some insecurities on holding on to the past and holding on to things. And then it took me a little while to kind of move past that and realize I have all this stuff ahead of me. I mean, things I've discovered since coming to Virginia. First of all, the animals here are so different than Alaska. There's giant birds that look like pterodactyls. I mean, there's storks and pelicans and cranes and herons and fox everywhere. I've seen more red fox in my neighborhood here than I saw the entire time I was in Alaska. So the things I thought I was giving up, even though I don't see grizzly bears and moose like I did all the time, I still see animals every day. I still have lots to paint. There's kayaking and rivers, and it's different. It's beautiful. It's different. Not Alaska beautiful, but it's very beautiful here. So I'm just learning to appreciate the new things of where I'm at, and I'm having a blast doing it.
I love that. It reminds me of the Strangest Secret by Earl Nightingale, and he talks about what you think about, you become, and that's just been part of your DNA. So I have a couple more questions before we wrap up, but I want to ask you this. So you talked earlier about your journalism degree. Did you ever do anything with that?
I did. So I didn't like working in the newsroom. I figured that out because it gave me all these stories that I had to write about the local, board meeting and the whatever. I did not like writing for paper, but I always loved to write. I like to write creatively what I wanted to write about. So I did. I wrote freelance humor, women's humor, for a number of years, and the internet, because it doesn't forget anything. It's some of that stuff still out there, and I have a blog out there even on it. But I enjoyed writing humor, and I had a lot of fun doing that for a while.
Oh man, I got to tell you, I have this question that's asked, like, how do you get all this done? You have done so much, and it. Honestly, after interviewing you, it sounds like you're like getting started. You just are so passionate. I love that. I do want to ask this one question, and this is the final question. And this is a question that I love to ask all of my guests. And the question is this: what does Janet, 10 years older, if she's knocking on your door today, what is she telling you?
Oh. I think she's telling me to keep on learning. I think that that is the drive that for me gives me the most pleasure and creates those new adventures. As my husband, he has that kind of same drive. And during COVID, those first few weeks, we were like, what are we going to do? Because we're never home. We don't really watch TV. We're out doing stuff. We're kayaking. We're exploring. We're checking out a new area. We're trying something new. And so we decided that we were going to take this opportunity, even though in Virginia we were locked down, couldn't go anywhere, and we learned new skills. So he learned to play the guitar, and he took up some cooking. I started running. I learned how to play golf. We both took a class. He did WSET, it's called. It's Wine Spirits Education Trust, but it's a level 2 wine. Like if you're going to be a sommelier, you kind of take those classes. He did that for wine. The spirits one. I learned how to make new cocktails and all about the different liquors. And so we just try to keep learning. And I would hope that 10 years from now, if I met my 10-year self, that would be the advice. Keep learning, try new things, and keep experiencing it.
Oh man, I just love that. I have not really been a runner, and I downloaded the Couch to 5K app back in March.
Yep,
and I said the same thing. I'm like, okay, I'm going to just learn how to do this. And I'm still running today, and I ran a 5K, a 10K, and getting ready for a half marathon. It's like,
good for you.
But I just love that. And I get energized talking to other people that have that, hey, I just want to keep learning, because the thing I've realized is this: the more we learn, the more we can help others. Yep. Right? Oh man, that's fantastic. Oh man, this has been, the time just flies by. I was sharing this with you earlier. I was like, listen, it will just fly by. I so much appreciate you sharing your story and your perspective and wisdom today. Can you just share with the listeners and viewers, if they wanted to learn a little bit more about you, maybe your paintings, how's the best way they could follow you?
The best way, well, I'm on LinkedIn as well, but my art stuff is under Janet Hanofee, or Artists for Conservation. So that's probably, if you just go to Artists for Conservation's website, you'll see my name as one of their signature artists there. And we do a lot of work with, conservation and giving back to animals and or areas that are having issues or problems. And so I try to stay pretty involved with them as well.
That's fantastic. I'll make sure and put that in the show notes so everybody will have access to that. Janet, it has been an honor to have you on the show today.
Thank you.
And for you sharing your, just your perspective around leadership. I know it's going to help a lot of people, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to be very inspired by some of the things that you've done. I'll put all that in the show notes. I appreciate you coming on today very much.
Absolutely. Thank you. I enjoyed it.
You're welcome. Okay, I'll talk to you later.